Is milk healthy? No. I'm sorry, it's not. But here's the good news. Before I lose you, before you get angry, there is a version of milk that can be healthy. And it's actually the only form of milk that you should ever consider drinking. And it's raw milk. Now, many of you are thinking like, wait a second, raw? And especially with cancer, I specialize in cancer and we're walking people through cancer from nutrition, detox, essential oils. And my son had cancer, and I will never forget the oncologist said, oh my gosh, absolutely do not allow him to have any raw foods, especially raw milk. Well, fortunately, I knew better. I was educated, and I also had a really good source of raw dairy. So we actually continued to give him not only raw dairy, but we were giving him raw kefir, which has a component in the nutrients that actually has been proven in different studies to help fight cancer cells, which is pretty incredible. And I learned this from a good dear friend of ours, Mark McAfee, who owns the largest raw dairy farm in the United States, actually in the world, I believe, organic Pastures. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about them in a moment. But first, what I want you to understand is why raw milk got a bad rap. And there sure is raw milk you should not be drinking, okay? So back in the 1800s with the Industrial Revolution and up until this point, people were drinking raw milk and they were healthy and they were thriving. Well, all of a sudden, about 1800, in the early 1800s, this demand became, the demand grew for raw milk as population was growing and people were moving into cities and populating cities, the demand grew. So in order to keep up with the demand, producers of dairy, which at the time was raw, had to confine the cattle. They had to basically have more cattle to produce more milk. Well, in doing this, they had to compromise on the standards of how they were otherwise producing our food. And so now you have them trying to keep up with production. And so what they're doing is they're putting all these cows in tight quarters in dirty cities and producing milk. Well, guess what? All of a sudden, because the lack of clean environment, the cows are no longer on pasture where they should be enjoying a healthy environment. The cows are getting sick because they're knee deep in their own manure. They're in cities, they're confined in barns, and they're getting really sick. So then they have to start giving the cattle antibiotics. Well, meantime, people are getting sick that are drinking this milk because it was full of bacteria. So now introduce Louis Pasteur, who is the genius who came up with the idea of pasteurization. Pasteurization means that you cook the crap out of milk. You literally kill it. You murder the milk. There is no longer any benefit nutritionally in the milk. But guess what? It's safe. So now people weren't dying any longer, but guess what was happening? We started to see increase in digestive issues. We started to see crazy eczema outbreaks. We started to see ear infections become rampant. And what happens is that when you heat milk, when you pasteurize milk, you're killing all the bad, but you're also killing all the good. And so now there's no good bacteria in the milk that's actually allowing your body to absorb and digest it. So here's another thing to understand. People will still say, okay, but I'm at least getting some calcium from the milk, right? Absolutely not. There is calcium in the milk, yes, but you're not getting it. Do you know why? Because phosphatase, which is the enzyme that is absolutely necessary to absorb calcium, is totally destroyed in the pasteurization process. So for those of you who deal with lactose intolerance, I'm pretty confident that you would be able to enjoy raw milk with no problem. The reason that you're having an intolerance is because when you heat the milk, the sugar content goes up. And the lactose is actually milk sugar. Lactose is naturally occurring sugars in milk. And that goes through the roof when you heat it. It's just like fruit. Fruit is really healthy, but the minute you cook fruit, the sugar content increases. So for those of you who are lactose intolerant, you're going to be able to likely enjoy milk raw and not have any of the uncomfortable side effects. Now, let me say really quickly, there are few sources of raw milk in the United States that are really safe and that are public that I could tell you about. But the one in particular is Organic Pastures Raw Dairy Farm. Because you could certainly go to a farm and get their raw milk, but here's the problem. We want to make sure that these farms are actually taking care of their cattle, that these are in really clean environments, that the milk is going through testing to make sure that there aren't any pathogens in the milk. And Organic Pastures Raw Dairy does a phenomenal job at this. They actually have a state-of-the-art testing facility. They have a totally clean milk production facility, and it's a beautiful farm where they love on those cows. But again, that's in California, and they can't ship their dairy outside of California except for their cheese and their butter. So for those of you who enjoy milk, my suggestion is go to realmilk.com, and you can start doing some research to find out if you can find a raw dairy farm close to you that you go and visit to make sure that it is a clean environment, that it looks like the cows are well taken care of, and just start asking some questions. In fact, there's some good questions on that on realmilk.com. They can walk through the website, and you're going to see all kinds of helpful information and good questions you can ask. Now, on Facebook, I also linked to one of the blog posts that I wrote. And for you on Instagram, if you go to susanjohnson.com/blog, and if you just type in raw dairy, you're going to see a couple articles pop up that I wrote. And one of them in particular is I go into in-depth explanation of why raw dairy is actually safe. So all that to say, the answer to the question from a long time ago was, is dairy healthy? Is milk healthy? No. But raw dairy can be. Now, I do want to say one other thing. Some of you have a casein intolerance. And so casein is the protein that's naturally occurring in milk. And unfortunately, if you have a casein intolerance, you do need to avoid all dairy, not just the pasteurized. You'd also have to avoid raw because your body is not tolerant to the casein. I wish I could share with you when I had my private practice. I did a study on a child who had this terrible case of eczema, and we started him on raw milk. In fact, Organic Pastures donated the dairy for the study because I was so intrigued by this. My daughter was raised on raw milk. My son had raw milk for just a little bit of time. He didn't tolerate, he doesn't do casein, but we knew all of the incredible benefits. And so we did a study with this little boy, and his eczema, you guys, if I had the pictures here to show you, it was phenomenal. Completely reversed his eczema. He started focusing at school. He stopped getting ear infections. He stopped with his cough that he was experiencing. So it's a beautiful example of how healing, not just nutritious, but healing raw dairy can be if you can tolerate it. Now, for those of you who can't tolerate dairy at all, don't worry. We're going to still be friends because I just wrote a post today on the blog, susanjohnson.com/blog. And it is a vegan ice cream recipe that you are going to basically want to marry me for because it's that good. Okay, maybe not. But listen, you guys, I'm trying to work that confidence back in from the yoga session this morning that I told you about. So you can just pretend that we're going to be really good friends after you enjoy this recipe. But this is a vegan ice cream recipe that I created that was, you guys, it's so simple. You're going to look at it and be like, that's it? And it's delicious, and it's really low in sugar. So if you're walking through cancer, or you are ill, you're walking through some sort of a disease and you really need to be avoiding sugar, enjoy this recipe. And you can play around with it. There's 2 recipes on there, but just play around with the toppings and surprise your kids when they get home from school today with a healthy but delicious ice cream recipe. So your marching orders from today, I really want you to take this information and actually do something with it rather than just listen to me talk like a crazy person. I want you to do something. And so the 3 things that I'm suggest you do is, number 1, stop drinking pasteurized milk. Yes, even the organic pasteurized milk. You guys, it's doing you no good. It is empty calories. You're not even getting the calcium from it, as I explained earlier. So get rid of your raw milk, or get rid of your pasteurized milk from the store. And if you're in a state or in an area that has a safe, healthy source of raw milk, again, in California, you have Organic Pastures, then switch to raw milk. But if you can't enjoy dairy at all, I also have recipes. If you go to susanjohnson.com, you're going to find recipes for coconut milk. And there's some different nut milk options that you can do as well. But try this ice cream. You're going to love it. My husband and my kids really enjoy it. It's low in sugar, and it's still totally delicious. So I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your week. And I'll be sharing more just in my feed on Facebook and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next week.